Twosies all intermixed with each other. You want, somebody's district to be this district, and the investments made in their infrastructure to have the customers to repay those investments. And so not uncommon as growth occurs for those districts to kind of change as needs change, and that's what we're talking about here. So on this figure that's in your packet, the green area is Tri-County Waters District currently. The brown is the cities, and then this red line here is city limits. So to kind of help you get your bearings, it's kind of hard to tell in this figure, but on the northwest corner there is the Bear Creek subdivision. That's a unique one that's a very high urban density type development, but all within Tri-County's water district. You get to the south, south of Main Street, south of Locust actually, and it all becomes city district, and you have some city subdivisions down there that are already serviced by the city. But you have this in-between area on 6600 Road that is currently in Tri-County's district, but it's R4 zoning, so it's kind of geared, one of the last areas geared to be high density, and we've had a couple projects eyeing some high density multifamily residential housing in the area. As growth has continued out here on Tri-County system, and they've kind of reached a point where they are unable to continue supporting continued urban levels of growth without creating issues as far as fire protection. And that's not a bad thing on their system. It's a rural water system. It's not necessarily designed to provide fire protection. They've been able to kind of make it work on Bear Creek so far, but as growth continues out here, they're hitting a tipping point where their system would no longer be able to support those higher levels of density, higher levels of development. Obviously, when you have more density, you need more fire protection, and it's higher consequence should the fire protection systems fail, because then you can start getting fire spread between buildings because they're so close together. So what is proposed here is kind of three drivers, or meant to kind of fix three problems. The first is to facilitate continued urban development out here. Again, with those R4 zoning and all of that, makes sense. This is a logical place for urban growth to occur, but they need the water system to be able to support it. In contrast, the city's water system is built for urban levels of development with all of that fire protection. So we're looking to modify the boundary within the area shown here in black to change that over to the city's water district, and that kind of encapsulates a lot of these R4 areas here. There's 2 projects in the pipeline that we're aware of for a couple hundred housing units along the eastern side. But the second piece of this is an interconnect. And so in order to support continued build out of Bear Creek, which again would kind of be fire limited at its current point if we did nothing, what we're proposing here at the end of this line is a interconnect between the city system and Tri-County system. And so it's metered, and so in an emergency situation, if the pressures drop in their system in response to a big fire demand, ours would be able to supplement it. So the valves would open up and feed their system through that fire, and then as the demands drop off, it would turn back off, and then at the end of the year we clean up, and if we ever have a break on our system and we need their system to feed ours from a redundancy standpoint, it can, and all of that can be metered, so at the end of the year we can bill for any water usage that went one way or the other to make sure that the accounting works out if we're sharing water. The third driver for this project is kind of the whole northeastern quadrant of the city's water system out here is fed by a single water line. Our water master plan has always identified a redundant loop or a secondary feed for this area so that you're not reliant on a single break. Depending on where it breaks, you could end up with a lot of vulnerability for this area. If it broke near the southern end of the feed, that whole area gets shut down while that's being worked on, which is obviously something we try to avoid in our system and have redundant feeds to keep shutdowns as small as possible. So those are kind of the 3 primary drivers for the district change. Practically speaking, there's a project that would come with this. So this is the first step. It's again been kind of worked on in various ways for the last couple of years. This latest kind of catalyst to push this over the finish line was we had a couple of projects, the housing projects that were eyeing the area and couldn't move forward without it. So it's kind of helping create the district change and a project. So proposed in the 2025 budget is a project to construct the city main line through here. We may, depending on funding, may utilize portions of the Tri-County line, switch them over to the city. construct a main line through there, construct the new interconnect between our system and theirs, and then kind of make this change over to the city's district. What's proposed as part of that project would be anybody who's in city limits. Some are in city limits currently being served by Tri-County. If you're in city limits and within this boundary change, we would change you over to become a city water customer, which is kind of the inevitable kind of natural progression as the city moves out, that urban areas get on the city's urban system and get the city's fire protection. And part of that is a rate change that would come with that. So Tri-County's rates are rural rates. They're a little different. They have a little different system maintenance obligations than an urban system. And so the customers that would be affected here, they're highlighted on this figure. The meters are shown as red dots on here. Anything that's in the boundary within city limits would change over to the city. So the bulk of those are on Draft Horse Drive. This was a city subdivision built on Tri-County system, but it's a city subdivision. So that's probably our most, and then there's a couple onesie twosies down here that are within city limits and would change over to the city's billing. And I'll go into the details on the numbers of that. There are a couple Tri-County customers because we don't want duplicate dead-end lines. The city main line would become the only water main through here, and any Tri-County customers would be served by the city's water line but still billed by Tri-County, and we would just work out that accounting with Tri-County.
So the question I have is that this area is served by Tri-County on their rural system, and they also have an urban system, or is that rural system all they have?
That's all they have. So by Tri-County's kind of founding documents, they are a rural water district and they do not provide fire protection. They don't have to. They're not obligated to. Where you get these kind of situations where this urban-rural interface, and as cities grow out, you have places that are still kind of rural, but once you start bringing in a city subdivision, it has to meet all city fire codes, and that's where, essentially without some kind of change or interconnect, you're unable to do any kind of urban development. So you end up with these weird rings that can't even develop without these types of changes. So the proposal here is switch over from Tri-County system completely over to the cities in this area.
The other question I have, Scott, is that we currently have a 6-inch line servicing that whole area. What size of line would we be adding as that redundant loop?
We'd be going to a 12, most likely finalizing in the design, but most likely running a 12-inch line. Tri-County has there's an old AC feed that came through here off of an old connection to Product 7 that ran down here before Tri-County reconfigured their system. So there's a big water line, they don't have big water lines feeding it on Tri-County side. So the city may be able to take over portions of those bigger lines and then add, properly sized feeder connections into our system at each end to make it all work. That's all being worked out in the design, but that's the conceptual plan at this point.
I notice that we have several meters we're going to change out to city meters. How are we handling with those customers on the price increase situation?
Yeah, so the plan would be, the first step would be a letter. So this kind of just makes everyone aware of the changes that would just be associated with that. So this is the difference in rates between Tri-County and the city and what it would mean for a customer. So obviously it depends on how much water you use in a month, but say, an average, in the winter, typical household use is 3,000 to 5,000. In the summer, it's 10 to 20. So say an average of 10, each house would see an increase of about $19 a month coming onto the city's water rates. The plan for that would be first start with a letter kind of explaining the why and what's going on. We don't want to do anything yet until everything was approved, because if it was a moot point, we didn't want to just get the neighborhood get them worked up about anything that may or may not be happening. So the first step would be a letter kind of explain the why and including these data so they would understand what it is, and we'd probably have an open house to kind of have Q&A and just listening session on what and why, and help them understand the difference between urban and rural water systems and how the rate structures are different, essentially.
Is that city sewer that's serving this area now?
Yes. Yep. Most of the areas served by city sewer.
Do we charge them additional for the being out of the city on the sewer lines?
Nope, not currently. The code's not set up that way for sewer at this point. So any sewer usage out here would be straight usage. That's a good point. Yeah, if that went down and to counter it, but Yeah, those are all straight usage now.
Do we have an estimate, kind of sort of, as to what it would cost to do that addition, and what kind of impact would it have on the current city fees? I know we're going to have to raise the price up to support the new water treatment plant that's going to go out south of town. And I was just curious as to what this is going to cost our city taxpayers. You know, there's a lot of people that keep contacting me and say, hey, is this part of growth paying its way, or is this city providing services for developers to take advantage? I know we're in a housing crisis, but, you know, we have a lot of vacant land currently in town that probably has the water that we could use for multiple families.
Sure.
So,
I guess the first thing I'll say is it's all, there's no tax or general fund tax dollars for this project. This is all water fund. So it's all based on the water user rates that would pay. So any extension of this mainline product, regardless of the housing, that product is proposed in 2025, even if that housing doesn't occur. Our system, again, with a single feed out here, that's why we like these products that have multiple tiers and multiple benefits. So if no housing were to go in alongside here, we would still propose to construct the mainline extension, do the district change. And the reason for the district change to accompany the mainline extension is we don't want to invest money in a new mainline and then not have customers alongside it that pay capacity fees and user rates to repay the cost of that water line. And that's generally how the water fund's set up, is that, you know, the users and the capacity fees pay for the system as it goes along, and they're, you know, commensurate with each other. And so, you know, it's not taking anything from general fund. It's really just within a typical high priority water capital project. The incidental benefit is, you know, it opens up the area for housing, and it's zoned well for housing, so we get a good twofer that way, in that this can help facilitate development. We also get continued build out of Bear Creek, which is one of our, you know, affordable is a relative term, but more attainable housing options in town that's well established, and without this, couldn't continue to build out. And that's just a product of, you know, they started, and when they started, Tri-County system was able to keep up. And as development has occurred here, elsewhere on their system, and obviously as things get drier, water demands in the summer go up higher, and that's taking away from the proportion available for fire flow. That all being said, the developer of Bear Creek has agreed to contribute towards the construction of the interconnect as well, because that does help keep Bear Creek going. It's kind of a unfortunately tight situation where a neighbor is halfway built out, and the supply conditions have changed for that subdivision. And so I can't remember the exact number on that. I think it's between 10 and 40,000 or something. But nonetheless, and that's just the interconnect portion itself, which is the vault and valve controller, which aren't that expensive in the big picture. But does that answer your question?
partially. The other part was about rate increases. Would it possibly generate rate increases for our existing water users?
Oh, yeah. So this product alone, no, this is a relatively small product in the big picture of the water budget. So there's nothing related at all to this product that would drive rate increases. That being said, the rates overall are going up for Tri-County and for the city, obviously in response to payment for the new treatment plant. So, you know, all rates will be going up, but nothing specific to this project that would spur a rate increase by any means. This is just kind of typical capital construction. And again, without the housing, it would even be a priority project for us to keep resiliency on the system in this portion of town.
One more question back on the backflow preventers. Would be, as a city, providing those, or are we just having each of the meters that we're moving into the city? I know because the reason why I ask is years ago when they tied the second line into Sunnyside Road, there were quite a few houses in the older part of town that, without their backflow prevention, they were, or not backflow, but pressure reducing valves.
Yep.
They were blowing their faucets up and stuff like that.
Yep, that's an excellent question. So the pressure differential, we're about 20 PSI higher than Tri-Counties in this area. So this is the same issue we had on Riverwood. So what we do as part of the capital project for the changeover is we install new meters with dual check, and then immediately downstream of that put in a PRV vault, not knowing if the houses have them or not. So all modern homes, so like a lot of those ones on draft tours, should have PRVs, but even as just as a backup measure, just to make sure we're covered, we put a PRV immediately downstream when we leave, we set it at the same pressure that they had from Tri-County. And so their system would see no change. The nice part is, though, is it allows them, if they wanted to, they can turn that up and actually get more pressure off of our system if they want it, which a lot of times people do. And then they can, get it, if they were at 60, they can get to 80, because a lot of times typical target residentials, up to 80 or so. But nonetheless, it makes no change to their system, or to their house that they would see, because we also don't, from a liability standpoint, don't want to put new pressure on a house that hadn't seen it, kind of thing. But then gives them the flexibility to go out if they need to. And that's kind of the stuff we explain through our letter and our open houses and stuff too, to help them understand how all that would work and what's available to them.
Juliana has a question.
Scott, on page 2, at the bottom of the page, you have the statement that once the new city main line is constructed, it's proposed that all customers currently within city limits would be switched over to city water service. I think you mean in that area.
Yes.
You're
Yeah.
not, because this statement tells me that me and Brown Ranch, I'm going to start going on city water too.
Within that area only, yes, I can
Within that
clarify
area.
that.
Would you
for
add
sure.
that?
That might be a good
Yep, that's
clarification.
important,
yeah.
yep,
You
yep.
said it when you presented a while ago, but it's not written.
That's an excellent catch. Yes, that's the intent, within the district only.
Okay.
Within this district change.
I like it when you went into the table 1 of the comparison of water rates, that you pointed out that Tri-County receivers pay a mill levy, because I wouldn't have noticed that. And so I was comparing Tri-County cost to city cost, and there's a huge difference. But then when I figured in what I personally pay in mill levy every year to Tri-County, it would make my cost be about $107 more a year, instead of the huge amount that I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, and I think.
Okay, so thank you for including that mill levy.
Yeah, and that's something when that came up too, we were trying to get to the bottom of that. And Dave talked to their director. I think, I'm a city water customer. I think I pay too, or is it just Tri-County customers that pay mill levy? Do you know? So I think we all pay that.
All
either
citizens
way.
of the county of Montrose all pay the same mill levy, even if you don't use the Tri-County water. The mill levy is inherent in the system.
It was interesting.
That's interesting.
So,
Like
yeah,
most department stuff,
as
too.
city
Yeah.
customers, we're already paying for the Tri-County mill levy anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know the history of that, but yeah, that was our understanding
Yeah,
as well.
but the fact that they have a mill levy allows them, because they're supported by the mill levy, they're allowed to have a lower price because they have a secondary income stream, which allows them to charge less. We do not have a property tax or a mill levy, so therefore we have to charge what our actual costs are.
So therefore, city users pay more so that I personally can pay less for water.
You're welcome.
I don't know the exact history and nuts and bolts of that,
But
but
it amounts to, right?
I'm on Tri-County also.
All right, so are there any other questions?
No, yes, I
for-
want to continue. One more. You stated that Tri-County doesn't have fire protection. Okay, so what about those of us who are on Tri-County water? Do we not have adequate fire protection?
so I'll clarify, they are not required to provide fire protection by their bylaws. They do have it in some places. So Brown Ranch is a great example. That's a really bolstered, different zone of their system that has actually some of the best fire protection in town. They have more than we do in portions of Brown Ranch. So there's portions that their system is able to provide fire protection just kind of by nature of where it is on their system. It's alongside a main transmission, downstream of pump stations, things of that sort. So it's not a universal statement that Tri-County doesn't. It's just that they don't have to by statute, and so it becomes a case by case. So like as Brown Ranch continues to develop, each one will have to verify that they meet the fire protection. I don't ever anticipate any issues in Brown Ranch. But in this northern quadrant of their system, so everything downstream, there's 2 tanks that feed it, and they have relatively small feed lines. If demand were to continue to grow, they would get to a point where this quadrant of their system, which is a different zone of their system, would not be able to keep up.
And if they were to choose to upgrade their fire protection and the flow, that would be a pretty significant capital increase for them, which would probably reflect on a rate increase.
Certainly, and that stuff we've all worked with them. They're working on an updated capital planning, but that was kind of the first piece of, well, do you want to upgrade your system? Because they have the first right to serve this area. So the question is it worth for you guys to upgrade your main lines, work with developers to upgrade your main lines to bring an urban level type system to this area. And they generally, kind of their general response was, that's rural water district. Let's leave the urban and let the rural be rural and do this switch, was the cleaner change that came out of those discussions. Because that was certainly asked at the kind of front end of all of these discussions years ago. All being said, I'll kind of speak into the board portion of this as well. So this agreement did go to the Tri-County Board as well. They're a little larger board. I think the vote was 6-4 and 5 against, so it was a split vote. The primary kind of dissent was, why would we give up part of our district without compensation? You've seen that on previous agreements with other districts, that they typically would want to see a buyout, essentially, to compensate. In this case, they understood the benefits, because they'll continue to get taps and capacity fees in Bear Creek because of this project that facilitates them to continue out of their systems in areas where they already have decided to be urban in the past. And, that outweighed any profit loss or revenue losses, essentially, from the district change. But it was a split vote, and they discussed it for, I guess, I wasn't at the meeting, but at length. And, these, all things water are never cut and dry.
But I'm bummed. Yeah, unintentionally, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, are there any other questions for Scott on this item? Thank you, Scott. All right, we'll move on to the next item, which is a Les Schwab Tire Center Development Agreement. And this is Anthony Russo, Business Development.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So we have been working on this project for over a year now, I would say. Between just the initial design, layout, trying to figure out what exactly they were looking to do and how they were looking to do it. In the meantime, Les Schwab has been growing on the western slope. They've built a facility out in Delta. Now they're going to be coming out here with this kicking off hopefully fairly quick. They're already starting to, I guess, make overtures towards actually breaking ground and moving forward here in the next month or so. So we really don't have a lot of time to on our side to approve and get moving on this now, even though we've been working for a long time. The investment totals in this property, which is owned by Bert Huizinga, is $9,422,000. They are looking to build Les Schwab on one of the pads. This project, although it's, as we're putting it forward today, is geared towards an incentive package that will assist Les Schwab. It really opens up Montrose Drive, South Montrose Drive there. The project, if we do not do this, the other pads and the other property attached there would not have access to water or sewer. So this is actually helping everybody in that area that would come into Montrose, not just them. However, as they are the current developer of the project, that we are coming before you with them being the primary target for the incentive. So I think that's really important.
One quick clarification, and this is also tied to the next item. So the next item is also the same basic thing where we're going to be expanding the water and sewer and our infrastructure into that Montrose Drive area. Mm-hmm. And so this is not a separate standalone project so much as it is an addition to an existing proposal, a capital project that we're already planning on doing and already budgeted.
Yeah, so kind of two big picture intros here. So Anthony will talk about the development agreement itself, which includes some in-kind contributions. The in-kind contributions are the water project we'll talk about, and that's the next item. And I can dive into it here once he finishes his part. And then there's some sewer work that was being proposed as a reimbursement as part of the development agreement. Some right-of-way sidewalk work and some, I don't think they're doing water and sewer fee waivers, but just typical
permit fee
waivers that Bill does at the staff level. But so I think I can let Anthony finish the kind of nuts and bolts of the development agreement. Then, yeah, I'll just go straight into the infrastructure side of things.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that anybody
related.
watching the video understands that this is all tied together as part of an existing, ongoing, already discussed project that we've already had in the works.
Certainly.
So,
yep.
Correct. And so basically, one could happen, the latter one could happen without the other. However, this could not happen without the other. This is dependent. And so they are looking at a total of $3.5 million in projected revenue for this property, the Les Schwab portion only. we haven't talked about tax contribution because it really is a larger picture, and it's hard to determine what the impact would be on the total property at this point, as well as we don't know the breakdown of what is actual taxable income off that 3.5 million. So I don't want to talk to this as a incentive driven by tax benefit, more along the lines of an incentive that is driven towards development of a piece of property that we would not be able to otherwise develop, and then also future growth in Montrose. The developer's agreement that's before you was put together by Chris, myself, Scott. We went ahead and wanted to make sure we put this out in a development agreement, similar to what we do in the URA or in other places in town, to make sure that it's very clear what our expectations are, what we're paying for, and why we're paying for it. As you can see, it's all water based on water line and also sidewalk replacement there, as we will be coming through and doing a lot of work in the area. I guess with that, if you have any questions, I can go deeper into this, or I can turn it over to Scott and he can talk more about the project. And just so you know, we do have online, we do have Les Schwab as well as the developer for the property.
One thing I'll say on the development agreement side as it relates to infrastructure is the way it's set up. So you'll see within this table there's a Montrose Drive Waterline Interconnect, which is an in-kind contribution. So that's a city project being funded by the city, and I'll dive into that. Again, the right-of-way, sidewalk, there's a little bit of sidewalk replacements that are taking place. Those are kind of good candidates for, we like to replace sidewalks. Anyway, it's in the right-of-way. It's a good way to kind of get a twofer and help. The off-site sewer, so there's a mainline sewer extension needed once the water line's done and out of the way. It opens up the corridor to bring in the sewer. That would be their work. We didn't have a project for that anyway, like we did on the water, and so that work that's why it's shown as a reimbursement. The way it is written is that would be reimbursed upon CO, kind of reducing the liability there, that once they get the work done, get a CO by a deadline, so the start date, they've actually just had the pre-con with them. They're mobilizing this week. And I think we have a target completion date in there of June of 2025, if I remember right. Mm-hmm. This one's kind of set up that we'll do our water line portion, get that going. They would do their sewer line portion under reimbursement, get reimbursed at the time of the CO. With that, I'll kind of just quick dive into the water line project. The next item we'll be talking about the bid itself, so I'm just going to talk about the drivers for the project and the scope under this item. So within the packet is this kind of waterline project plans excerpt. So right now, Montrose Drive is kind of a weird dead-end tail of our system, waterline-wise, actually all utility-wise. So, as best we can tell, when Health and Human Services went in, they developed and built water and sewer services for Health and Human Services, but in doing so, there's no really mainline infrastructure sufficient to support development beyond Health and Human Services south of Montrose Drive. So it's, what we call a utility desert. There's, that's this whole area south of Montrose Drive, which Les Schwab is kind of one of 3 projects going in here. This area is generally unserviced by utilities. There used to be a church in here, and I think they were on septic, and then they had a sewer service that ran all the way across the street and tied in on Health and Human Services parking lot, which, for that era, it wasn't that uncommon for development patterns to happen that way. But certainly, by modern standards, we have master plans that kind of help lay out the overall network and hopefully avoid these kind of things. Knowing that someday this area was going to get cleaned up and redeveloped, when we did the Townsend Waterline project, so that was ahead of the CDOT overlays a couple of years back, we ran a stub over to Montrose Drive to get the worst of it over. Getting across Townsend is obviously a very challenging piece. We had Townsend torn up, we had the overlay coming. It was our chance to get a stub in, so that stub was put in with the intent of bringing that all the way over to the water line here over by St. Mary's Church. So to kind of orient yourself on this drawing, Health and Human Services is right here at the top. We ran a water line stub here straight off of, if you remember when we were boring and doing all that work over by Bluecorn, we got across Townsend, so that's already existing in place. And so the blue would be now the interconnect between those two, which is again a product we've been eyeing to clean up this area, get adequate fire protection for the area, for the type of growth that we anticipate. And then eventually, as Health and Human Services redevelops, which is kind of in the works right now as well, through some of the county's projects, it'd be a chance to clean up the services there too, to get all this consolidated into a single main line. We're not doing that now because we don't know what the future holds for Health and Human Services, so we don't want to spend a lot of money for something that may become obsolete or need to be somewhere else or a different size or things of that sort. But
And Scott, I'll add to that is that currently the folks that we're working with do have the option to purchase that if and when the county decides to move Health and Human Services to the new judicial buildings. So part of what we're doing today would set us up for the future. When we're talking future development, we're talking about the possibility of that Health and Human Services totally being redone and gone, moving somewhere else, and then someone else coming in, either doing housing there or whatever that project would look like in the future.
Yep, that's a good point. So what's proposed here is just the right-of-way portion of the project. So everything blue here, the dash line is a bore. So we set up in the parking lot here, bore across, run the stub out from the right-of-way to what will become the Les Schwab site, gives them a point to tie on to. Another unique element, though, is all of these are all main lines, and they're kind of master planned for the continued development of the area south of Montrose Drive, and also the road extension. So if you remember in the comp plan, there was vision of an interconnect, the Woodgate Backage Road we're working on at the southern end. We got that up to Encanto. The portion behind Murdoch's is likely to develop. It has room to get up to Church, and then that just leaves this portion here. This gets us down, and then all that would be left were two properties in between, which over the years have expressed interest of, potentially redeveloping. We won't actively pursue those rights of way. There's no driver for us to do that at this time, but it does leave the corridors available, so as development occurs, those connections can be made. So with the Les Schwab site development, they played along with that. Easements have been granted. Corridors have been preserved to leave all that corridor open. But the product that we'll talk about next and the contracting part is essentially everything in the blue here as a city project. And what we have to do to allow the sewer project to go in. So another challenge of this site is there's not a great route for the sewer. They evaluated going through Health and Human Services parking lot. They have some geothermal and stuff in there. It's just too congested with utilities. But we also the city doesn't want sewer lines down the middle of Townsend Avenue from a maintenance standpoint. Obviously, you can imagine jetting in the middle of Townsend is not comfortable. So we wanted them onto the eastern shoulder. That's currently occupied by an old AC water line that's actually a redundant duplicate line that is not needed. And so what this project does, now with this interconnect in place, we can feed the area and abandon, we have to move the service for Dunkin' Donuts over, or actually the dental clinic by Dunkin' Donuts, and we'll terminate it down here by Coldwell Banker with a new hydrant. And that allows the water line within Townsend to go away, which is generally something we try and do. We do not like utilities in Townsend for obvious reasons. Just very difficult to maintain. And then that frees up the corridor to get the sewer line as far east as possible and out into the shoulder of Townsend for them to bring it down to the site. So a couple moving pieces there, but that's the kind of main driver for the water line project. I think when we get into the next agenda item, I'll talk about bidding and budget implications, because there was some budgeting already done for this. But I think any questions on the development agreement side of things?
So are there any questions for Anthony before Scott dives into the second part of this?
Or for Les Schwab or the owner of the property as well, because they're on the line.
I'm still kind of off a little bit here. Is the a tire shop right across the street from it, across from Blue Corn?
There's a Big O Tire.
Yeah, okay, and so this Les Schwab is another tire distributor or whatever. Okay.
Any other questions? Any questions for our online representatives? If not, Scott, we'll go ahead and dive into the next part.
On to the next part. So the water line contract itself, so this is just being presented like a typical city project. So within the packet is the drivers for the project that I just ran through and the bids themselves. We got 3 bids on this project. Knowing this was coming, we bid it a while ago, and then as they worked through we bid it back in May, but as they worked through all the development agreement stuff and their project came into focus, it sat until we were now bringing it before council. So as you can see, 3 bids there, all Montrose or Grand Junction, really tight bid. Usually we don't see them that tight, so we're confident in those numbers. The project would be taking place kind of starting as soon as possible. The completion date would be around Thanksgiving. They're shooting for earlier, but the earlier they can get that done, we'll actually sequence their work to get some of those abandonments in Townsend done early so that it can open up the work fronts for Les Schwab. While the work takes place, it'll be along Colorado Avenue. We'll maintain access. There won't be on-street parking on Colorado, or not Colorado. Yeah, right. Montrose Drive, sorry. The city, not the state. On Montrose Drive, there won't be any parking available along Montrose Drive itself, but the parking lots will remain open, and it's written into their contract that they'll have to maintain access to their eastern and western parking lots. The eastern will be from the eastern side, but the western parking lots at all times throughout construction. On the contracting sides, or the budget side, so the city budgeted, we knew this project was coming. We budgeted $150,000 kind of for what we considered our portions of the work, which was the stuff we would want to do anyway for an interconnect, not necessarily necessary to feed Les Schwab, but we didn't want to continue the dead end portion of our system. We want to interconnect it, loop for water quality, for redundant feed, for improved fire flow, all of those things. So there's already $150,000 sitting in the 2024 budget allocated to this project. So essentially the $184.37 balance is what we would consider kind of an economic incentive to help with those offsite portions to facilitate bringing utilities to the site, for Les Schwab and obviously future development of the area. And so the $184,000 is essentially a more or less unbudgeted supplement, and then all of the sewer, none of the sewer was budgeted. That's in the development agreement, so that would be sewer fund supplement if necessary. Obviously, if other projects come out such that that balance is there at the end of the year, won't need to be supplemented. But yeah, but again, this contract is just the water line portion that we would be contracting direct.
Any questions for Mr. Murphy on the Montrose Drive Waterline Interconnect contract? Well, that's a hard thing to say. I'm like, goodness gracious. I understand your pain. All right, if we have no other questions, we'll go ahead and move on to our next item on the agenda, which is the proposed ordinance for unauthorized camping, sleeping in public, and proposed amendment to park hours. And we'll turn this over to Assistant City Attorney Matt Magliaro.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Frank, members of council. Good morning. I'm here to talk about camping. Before council is the consideration of two new ordinances in Title VI, Chapter 1, and the amendment of an existing ordinance that's within our Parks Code, specifically Title 9, Chapter 10. The purpose of that, the latter amendment to the existing code, is to clarify our current code allows permitted camping in designated areas, as well as, but it bears some clarification, and there's a need to specify other circumstances where the city allows camping on its property. The purpose of the proposed code changes in Title VI is to take the prohibition in Title IX, move it into Title VI, and to strengthen basically that language and city's tools to discourage unauthorized, non-permitted camping upon public property, to discourage unlawfully remaining after notice for sleeping in all public rights of way, and to declare both activities a nuisance. The proposal appears clean versions on pages 46 through 52 of today's packet. The red line's on 53 through 59. I'm going to spend most of the time on the red line. Just by way of background, we as a city are property owners. We have, and as a property owner, we have a governmental interest in maintenance and preservation of the property, including but not limited to the parks, for the general health, welfare, safety, and benefit of all members of the public. The U.S. Supreme Court recently held that municipalities like ours may pass and enforce generally applicable laws prohibiting camping in public property, and that was in City of Grants Pass, Oregon v. Johnson, which was decided this term at the end of the term. That overruled the Ninth Circuit case on that. While we're not part of the Ninth Circuit and no other circuit adopted that rule, it was nonetheless pretty pervasive and persuasive throughout the courts, and many courts looked to that, and many of the ordinances looked to that holding throughout. I want to return to this, one of the concepts that came out of the majority ruling. The concept is government may not criminalize mere status in the law. It may permissibly impose fines, it may permissibly impose jail terms, incarceration as sanctions for conduct, but it is not mere status, and the proposal here to find and apply penalties to conduct, not mere status. I'm going to focus and go a little bit backwards. Actually, I'm going to start from page 57, the packet, page 5 of the red line, about what's in our code now, because I think it's a helpful starting place, actually, to discuss what we've got. So in our existing code, we have this section 9-10-1. It's two sections, A and B. First section just states the park hours, 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. That's when parks are closed, unless otherwise posted. B, there's no change to A, but B actually sets out an ordinance violation. It's couched in language kind of a trespass ordinance. It shall be unlawful for any person to enter upon or remain upon any of said parks or city property during hours which they are closed pursuant to this section. And then there are a number of exceptions. There's a run-on sentence that follows that, drafted no doubt by lawyers, which sets out 4 exceptions to the scope of what I just read. So we have a prohibition within that language of our existing code, and then we have 4 exceptions. So this is what we have in our ordinance regarding camping. It's permitted authorization, as well as unauthorized camping and its prohibition. I will say that I was the municipal prosecutor in this in the city for 4 years. I only saw this charged standalone maybe a handful of times. In large measure, I think it was because we have other tools to address this sort of issue, not the least of which is the trespass ordinance. It was codified in 2020. More on that in a minute. The proposed change here leaves A alone, but it does amend B. It moves the ordinance violation from there into Title VI, where most of the violations that are cited into our municipal court, where most of those live. That line is also a cross-reference to the other 2 sections that we'll talk about. Consistent with the other ordinance amendments and proposals that you've seen from me in the past, I take the run-on sentence and I'm building out those concepts separately to where they make a little bit more sense and are a little bit more coherently addressed. So B contains an exemption as proposed for City of Montrose employees. So if you have a park employee that needs to go maintenance the Cerise Park Amphitheater at 1 in the morning because an alarm's gone off, they're not going to be subject to the violation of this. And those acting also on behalf of the city or with its authorization, there's no sense in those folks being cited if they're in our parks with authorization. C, camping is authorized in Lions Park year-round. C breaks that apart and states that as the governing rule. It's only authorized with a written permit obtained by and through the city clerk's office. There's the last section G of this, authorizes the city manager's office or designee to make regulations and forms, which is intended to be a rulemaking, basically authority to build that out, that permitting system out. Camping is authorized on public property for those attending events under an events use permit or festival event permit in D. The 4th of July this year is a good recent example of that. We did allow under the festival event permit, I believe, a permitted camping in other parks pursuant to that. E preserves current language, accepting persons for authorized business for the city of Montrose. F is language that I took from or borrowed from Grand Junction's ordinances. They have an exception in theirs for camping when it's necessary after a formal declaration of emergency. So thinking like fires or floods where it's necessary to set up temporary shelter space in a public park to house persons who are displaced. The idea is that there would be an exception that reaches that particular area, that conduct. So basically, I'm moving the prohibition that's within 910.1, and I'm moving it into Title VI with 2 new ordinances. So prohibition on authorized camping, 6.110, and 6.112 on sleeping in public rights-of-way. Both sections, 6.110 and 6.112, were repealed when the trespass ordinance was rewritten and repromulgated in 2020. The only thing currently in those 2 titles, 110 and 112, is the word reserved. So the red line just simply strikes that and then builds out these. It also, in placement, the proposal to 2 additional ordinances would sandwich the trespass ordinance, which is a good deal of sense to place them there. So, camping, we'll talk about 6.110 and a proposal with that. I built this proposal by taking a look statewide at ordinances. Specifically, I looked at the city of Grand Junctions, Delta, Durango, theirs was their trespass ordinance, Fort Collins, Arvada, Aurora, Colorado Springs, and Grants Pass, Oregon, which was the subject of the U.S. Supreme Court case. I'm going to see what was passed upon there. The language and prohibition for camping on public property without the authorizations we just talked about in Title IX is in A. B is for private property, when done without the express consent of the property owner or owner's agent. I made that a disjunctive for a reason. In prosecutions before the municipal court, I've had instances where defendants have tried to argue that the prosecution was unavailing because they didn't call the owner of the property when it was a commercial property. Well, we called the owner's agent with authorization. That would be sufficient under this code. C is actually drawn from Arvada's code. I like the language regarding the unlawful for any person to construct or erect buildings or structures. We've had instances in this courtroom of folks that have built not just campsites, but basically almost bunker type or kind of rudimentary structures in addition to just tent camping. So it was meant to reach conduct such as that. The definitions in D of camp or camping are fairly extensive, as well as the other definition of public property. Those are drawn from Aurora's code. The definitions here are extensive related to the conduct. I did conform them to Montrose in some respects. As a practice point here, you want to have very thorough definitions to overcome arguments and challenge that the law is what's called void for vagueness. It's so vague that an ordinary person reading it would have to guess at its meaning, and therefore wouldn't have notice of what is prohibited. This would overcome that by having definitions that are fairly voluminous and that are intended to be comprehensive. I had a question about RVs and focused camping in not just necessarily tent camping, but in recreational vehicles. In the definition of camping, there is a line, camp or camping can include using a vehicle for overnight occupancy, or overnight camping violates city code or regulation or is not otherwise authorized by the city. What on earth does that mean? It's a cross-reference of sorts. There's a more specific ordinance to this issue in mobile home and travel home sections of the code. Specifically, and it moved, it used to be in Title 4, it's now in Title 11. It's MC 1113-6, use and location of travel homes, which does allow occupancy of these as a temporary dwelling only when either permitted by the city, within a travel home park that's permitted, or upon private property for temporary occupancy by out-of-town guests for periods not to exceed 30 days. There's a penalty provision that's within MC 1118 that cross-references basic sentencing code. So for adults, it's up to 364 days in jail and or a fine of $2,650 of both. In addition to that, we also have a prohibition on parking recreational vehicles under city rights-of-way. A combination of the both have been used successfully in prosecutions in the municipal court for folks living in RVs, and some of those prosecutions have resulted in jail time, as well as court-ordered cleanup. That, along with trespass ordinance, which I mentioned, MC 6111, and nuisance 641, as well as our littering in Title 6-3, are our main tools in current code. With proposal here would be expanding out to have additional tools to discourage the unauthorized camping. Penalty section. The first offense is a civil infraction. It's a fine set at $100. That is the amount for civil infractions in the state code. State CRS has such a thing called a civil infraction. That's the maximum fine is $100. Second or subsequent offenses, proven beyond a reasonable doubt, may carry jail. That is consistent with the regulatory regime that the U.S. Supreme Court considered with grants passed upon and found to be constitutional. That's why it's built that way. Adult defendants here are subject to a mandatory minimum 10 days in jail, intent of which is this is imposed and not suspended time, and then the maximum would be what our code allows, which is basically up to 364 days in jail for an adult. We do have one other mandatory minimum in the code. It's built in the trespass ordinance. This was built around a case outcome and a recent case outcome in Montrose Municipal Court involving repeat offender for trespass, nuisance, and littering, as well as the U.S. Supreme Court's holding that this was permissible. Declaration of nuisance in F. There's a 30-day abatement and trespass order from the parks. I borrowed some of this language from Grants Pass, Oregon code, and actually the language comes from there. It's tailored a little bit. For temporary exclusion from the park, I wanted to also make clear separate convictions, though, for nuisance under MC 641 may be also addressed with separate orders abating the nuisance. So oftentimes when we have something that's declared a nuisance in our state code, we pair it on a citation with the citation to nuisance under 641 that authorizes the municipal court, if that's separately a conviction of record beyond a reasonable doubt, to impose abatement orders under 642. So that's the reason why that's written that way. These are written in such a way that it makes clear separate, each day a violation could be a separate citation. That's existing code, 1-2-3, subsection C specifically. As well, sentences may be run consecutively. In other words, they can stack. There's an affirmative defense built in for choice of, for necessity. This is done because Justice Gorsuch's main opinion in the Grants Pass referenced that specifically within Oregon law. So the idea was I would build it into the language here, reacting basically to the majority opinion in Grants Pass that referenced it among the criminal defense protections available from conviction. Sleeping on sidewalk. A is essentially a legislative finding. This is how I looked specifically at Grants Pass, Oregon's, its Grand Junctions ordinance on this topic. A is how Grand Junctions ordinance starts. It's a legislative finding of why we would have such a prohibition in law. B and C are the language of prohibition. B is for sidewalks, rights of way, et cetera. And C is for pedestrian vehicular entrances to private and public property or within doorways for the same. I want to make a point here. D modifies B and C. So we're talking about elements to prove a offense beyond a reasonable doubt. D actually adds elements to a prosecution under either. So D modifies B and C in that a law enforcement officer has to, or a firefighter or a private property owner has to basically issue a cease and desist notice. It can be verbal. But they can't issue a citation, make an arrest, or otherwise enforce a section against a person unless there's a request to cease and desist is first made either verbally or in writing by any peace officer or firefighter displaying or presenting indicia or acting under the color of their official authority, or by the property owner or their authorized agent, and the person unlawfully remains in violation of this section. So somewhat it's a misnomer, the title. It's really unlawfully remaining after a cease and desist order is issued by a person with authority after a person's sleeping on a public sidewalk or in one of these areas. That's really the core of the offense. Going back to the concept again, we're talking about conduct, not mere status. So that's why that's built that way. That came a large measure from the city Delta ordinances was where that came from. First violation is a civil infraction again, and a second or subsequent may be punished in accordance with our general penalty prohibitions. There's no mandatory minimum here. The rationale for the difference is the unauthorized camping was more of a deleterious effect upon our public lands than this activity. I think that's about all I had for general presentation, unless there are any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Magliaro?
I had a couple. One of them is, why do we allow camping at Lions Park? Are there facilities there for it?
That is the current standing code. I can tell you it's been some time since that's been a permitted activity in the park, but I kept that as it is. I did run this by our park superintendent, Dan Payne. There are some, in the regulations at least, some regulations specific to the Lions building, the building park. But I don't know exactly the history. Bill, do you? No. I could say that's how the code exists and has been since 2012. So it makes sense, too, to allow permitted camping at least on one park in the city system.
But again, that's with a permit only.
Yes.
I think we had a question come up to council online talking about private property, and I think we have covered that.
Yes.
I think that's pretty clearly covered in this.
The other question I would have, within town where we have federal or state highways, we have the right to remove people who are camping under those bridges on those federal or state highways.
We have taken the position that we do, and yes, we have considered that to be, existing prosecutions have occurred under the trespass ordinance for people camping under the bridges. Generally, it's under A5. They're given a warning and a time to clear out and disperse, and then if they remain there, they're cited for that. So.
Okay, that's all I had.
Any other questions for Matt?
I had one, but I lost it. But actually what it did was, I was trying to find it in the section here about the use of the park after 11, when the park's closed. And what I was concerned about was the fact that sometimes I like to take long walks at night. And would that preclude that? Would it? And I didn't know that you couldn't use the park after 11 o'clock. Or is that just specific to camping or any activities? I'm not sure what section it is. I remember reading it, then I lost it.
Sure. It's 9-10-1 states the park hours, and there's a section within current code 6111 A7, I believe, is if you unlawfully enter or remain in any public park operated by the city during the hours which such park is closed, when such park has been posted with official city signs that are visible to persons entering upon the property, or have been posted at reasonable intervals along the property boundary and state the hours of lawful activity. I think the bar of the prosecution for that type of action would be the definition of unlawfully entering or remain. It's when one person's not licensed, invited, or otherwise privileged to do so. So I think there would be some issues with just walking through the park or prosecution for that. But in general, I can tell you that officers, I've not seen any citation for that within 4 years of practicing here for someone just merely walking through the park. It's people who are staying there or residing there.
Okay, because as we grow, I can assure you that more people are gonna be doing that sort of stuff, walking to the sidewalks and stuff for later time of night. May, in some instances, to get away from overcrowdedness.
Sure.
And you notice a lot of people saying, oh, we like to quiet this and quiet that in the city. And I don't want to, in a way, just kind of compound the fact that hey, it's okay to use this for anything but camping, you know. So that's what I was just curious about, as to how it would affect, say, night walker or somebody like that.
The ordinance definitions here specifically for the very kind of robust definition of camp or camping would exclude persons just walking through.
Yeah, I don't think we want to get into that question either, right there, okay. All right, well, if there's no other questions on that one, thank you, Mr. Magliaro. That was a very good explanation. And I think that really kind of complies with what the council's direction on this has been. So thank you for all your hard work on this. It's been excellent, excellent. And now we'll move on to our final item on our action discussion items, the ballot question wording for proposed lodging tax increase. And this is going to be our city attorney, Chris Dowsey, and I think city manager Bill Bell are going to weigh in on this and kind of get us in a position for a head nod and kind of some of the wording.
Yes, so,
We're not voting.
yes, this is by no means a vote. So it was brought up, I believe, last work session, about bringing forth a ballot initiative to increase the hotel room tax that we currently have in the city of Montrose. I'm really just looking for guidance as to a percentage, which I believe 6% was the last known percentage thrown about. I don't know if everybody is amenable to that.
I think that just the head nod on that was 6% represents kind of the median of that, but it's not the average. If we were going to be the average of our local communities, it would be even higher. But 6% represent a good middle-of-the-road number.
Yeah, 6% was a median on the research study that we did, so directly in the middle.
So it seems that's the head nod at this point. That will be the number going forward. The additional piece is what do we want these monies spent on? So we do have, as of this moment, the 0.9% as well as the 0.8% from restaurants go into the tourism promotional fund. That is 100% of those monies collected. That's where they go. I do know that there were ideas of street maintenance, childcare, affordable housing. I don't know if there are other ideas that we want. These are the things that I have worked into a ballot question at this, a preliminary ballot question at this moment. I'll just state of the 6%, 1% is for street maintenance, 1% is for childcare, 2% for affordable housing, and then 2% for the tourism promotional fund. So the tourism promotional fund will be bolstered by 1.1%, and then the additionals are in that category. Does that sound good to everybody? Is there something else I should be looking at?
Please go through those again.
Sure, absolutely. So of the 6%, now that we have the head nod, 1% for street maintenance, and then another 1% goes into the childcare, 2% of the 6% for affordable housing, and then 2% goes into the tourism promotional fund that's already established. That's currently getting 100% of what is being brought in for the hotel room tax.
I would like to, I would like to see the street maintenance and sidewalk repairs at a little bit higher, 1.5 or 2%. That's just my feelings. I feel that the impact that the visitors have on the streets and sidewalks of the city of Montrose should be borne by those visitors and not necessarily by the residents of the city of Montrose. I also believe that, I know that, we also have the funds currently that we're using for businesses. I'm not sure where that would come from, but I do know that I personally would like to see higher percentage used for roads and sidewalk repairs and here in the city.
One of the things that I look at is that I would like to see, I think that the percentages are, I have no objection to increasing to 1.5 for streets. The entire intent of this is to offset the impacts of our temporary or tourist populations coming through town. And one of the unrealized aspects of that is when they come here and stay in a hotel, as we expand and get more hotels, we have to have hotel staff. As they go to our restaurants, we have to have restaurant staff. And so that was kind of that component for me of the affordable housing and childcare, is to be able to offset, be able to provide for our workforce and our service industry. So I don't really necessarily want to take a whole bunch out of that, but if we took, and just as a thought, and instead of 2% for housing, doing 1.5 for housing, 1.5 for streets, I think that would be a good balance.
I would much rather take 1% off of the tourism promotion, because if we continue in the future and get 1% for tourism, that's even more than they're getting right now. Right now, they're getting the entire 0.9, right?
Correct.
So 1% would be a little bit more, and I'm not totally sure our community wants us to continue promoting tourism. I think a lot of our community is saying we're doing really well the way we are right now.
Sure. I would just add that it's not just tourism, so all our community events that are for locals is out of that fund. So if people want to, having that additional, we want to go more than what we currently have so we can continue to provide 4th of July activities,
Right.
Christmas parade activities, the music at the amphitheater. That's all, most of that comes out of the tourism promotion fund as well.
Then I would suggest we add that wording, that it's tourism promotion and community event,
Just to clarify it, add a
to
little
clarify
more
that
detail
some of
in
the
there.
money is staying for our community's benefit, not to draw in more tourists. Understand?
Yeah,
Okay.
yep.
Bill, I have a quick question. When we first talked about this, we had talked about historical preservation and making sure that we had funds for the downtown corridor and upkeep and maintenance, and I don't see that in this portion. I know we haven't talked about it, but can you speak a little bit to that?
I think that's what Ed was just referring to a little bit. That also could come out of those additional tourism promotional dollars. We didn't add that in there yet because we wanted to talk about it today. So, and that goes along with community beautification. So I had sent some of that detail to you on breaking it down a little further. Community beautification, facade improvements, and community events. That's just not in this rough draft at the moment, but we can add detail like that in there.
Yeah, I think one thing we don't want to overlook, my magnetic personality. I think the one thing we don't want to overlook is the fact that those people staying here also expend dollars in our businesses. So we are collecting income tax or taxes off of that, just expenditure taxes. So I don't see it as a total loss one way or the other.
The general consensus seems to be like 1.5 for streets, 1.5 for, or 1% for the going into the tourism rather than 2, and making up that difference out of the tourism fund? Is that, or would 1.5 be better because we're trying to increase the quality of those community events? Because right now, as Judy Ann pointed out, we're getting 0.9 into our tourism fund. If we made that 1.5, that's a pretty significant increase, and gives us an opportunity to kind of expand some of those
I
events.
think 1.5 is great.
Yeah,
Yep. Beefing up the streets is a good idea.
I like to, because there are a lot of traffic, and then,
But
and
please-
I want to say this.
Add those words of community events.
Yeah, add those words. But from my perspective, this isn't intended to like take out or replace what we're already doing for our streets. I don't want to, this isn't going to be like, with 2A, we had discussed that there were certain limitations that we had added that, as far as where our levels of spending go, I don't want us to, this is just a separate and additional and a wonderful, great bonus on what we already allocate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and during our budget discussions this week as a staff, we talked about how would the money actually be managed when it comes in. So Shaney described that it can just come in and go right into those different pots. So we don't have to create a bunch of new funds. The auditors don't like that. A fund is basically a checkbook. But it could come in and then we don't have to do much transferring. We'll just have that automatically go into those pots of money.
Are there any other discussion or comments on that final item?
All right, so just to clarify, so I have the, I make sure I have everything correct. I am now doing 1.5 for street maintenance, 1% for childcare, 2% for affordable housing, and then 1.5 for the tourism promotional fund while adding in language about community events. Is that correct?
Sounds like about what we've discussed.
Perfect.
I like that.
I like it a lot. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
And we look forward to seeing the finalized language of this coming soon, so we can actually look at that before we actually submit this to the county. So thank you for your hard work on that. All right, moving on, general city council discussion.
I have something. Recently, I received a short packet here that you should all have a copy of it. It was a letter addressed to the city council, a little disgruntled, a little bit disgruntled about the fact that they can no longer provide their home-cooked goodies for activities. I think that the reason why I'm bringing it up is because I would like them to be allowed to continue to provide their cooks and candies for their personal activities at city sites. I imagine this is probably the pavilion because there was no real indication as to where it's the dance group. And the reason why I say that is because if we deny these our residents the ability to bring their homemade goodies, then how does that make us as a city where we have our city barbecues and the employees bring in little goodies to each of their department heads and that sort of stuff? I guess I don't quite understand why we're limiting some residents and not making this inclusive of the whole city. I believe that somewhere or some way that there's a law, and that's why I had to bring it up that for discussion perhaps maybe at the next work session, so that the city attorney has time to look up to see if there's perhaps maybe a disclosure that they can put up, sign, eat at your own risk or something per state law. I know there's law concerning trespassing. You can go across people's property if it's posted saying, hey, under Colorado state statutes, that if you use this as an access to a bicycle path or something, that you'd be on your own risk. And I think that that would be an appropriate thing to do for our constituents. I don't know. I don't think we've ever been sued for somebody bringing something to a city function. For example, like the police recently had their barbecue. I don't imagine they barbecued everything in a certified kitchen or bought their own stuff and brought it in. I think that all came from their homes, and I think we should offer our residents the same courtesy.
The question I would have is this actually something we have in our regulations for the pavilion? And because my understanding of the way that with health code, and I'm fairly conversant with that, is that the only prohibition that I'm aware of, and I'm certainly able to be corrected, is if you're selling these items. And if an item is for sale, then there are limitations and restrictions on how they're prepared. But if they're just being freely given and shared, that's but I think this is something I'd like to hear more about.
Sure. This is the first I'm hearing of this.
Yeah.
So I don't even have a copy of this letter. So I will happily look into this. And
I believe it was in the contract for the dance group to use the pavilion just recently, so.
Sure. I will look into it and go from there.
Yeah, because I don't have any
you.
background or knowledge on this of anything that we've changed or done, so, yeah, other than what we've received.
That's it, that's
Yeah,
all I
yeah,
received.
all right.
That in a
All right, great. So-
petition with about 100 names on it.
Yeah, that'd be great. So that's something for us to look into, and I think that Mr. Dowsey can look into that and get us back some better information on what we actually are or are not doing.
Did you hear Ed say that there's a petition with about 100 signatures? For what? For this issue. No. So you might want to be aware of more stuff that Ed has.
It's interesting for them, a dozen or 20 people that go to the lunches there and stuff, so it's diminishing. but the
Maybe it's
dance is
dance
more
night.
popular.
Yeah, I think that, the way it's worded in here is it's about the dances.
I don't
So,
know.
yeah, it'd be good for us to find out more and dig in and find out a little bit better information on that.
Lisa and,
All right, excellent.
And if I can get into my emails, I could probably get you some contact numbers, pushing the wrong buttons, and I was trying to look it up to get this information.
Oh, Ed, and you and your technology, bud, I tell you what. All right, is there any other city council discussion?
I was just going to ask Chief Hall, how's the school supply program going?
It's going okay. We're hoping for a large number of donations maybe here this week to kind of finish it out. The city did its part and donated quite a bit as well. So we've got a deal out on Facebook, I think, this morning, asking for a final push for donations. So,
Any particular items that you're short?
actually, we have quite a few backpacks, and so
Well, we have a bunch more. so-
I would, we always would appreciate more backpacks, but I think more of the perishable items, wide ruled paper, I think is a good one. Over this last weekend, I was kind of searching around for some of that, and that seems to be
It's
a.
hard to find.
It is hard to find. Yep, it is. And so wide ruled paper, crayons, colored pencils, erasers, glue sticks, just some of those types of items, I think would be great.
And the final push for this is Wednesday?
Yep, Wednesday morning,
at 8 o'clock?
we'll have a photo opportunity in the community room, and then we have some kindergartners and first graders all throughout that morning up until lunch that'll be touring the police department, and then we have a bus out in the parking lot, a school bus, so that for those kids who haven't been on a school bus yet, they can tour the school bus to kind of get orientated, so their first day of school, if that's not something they've experienced, will be a little less intimidating.
That's going to be so much fun
It's
for
neat.
those kids.
Yep.
Can't you give up some of your grants?
I eat all my crayons.
So Friday afternoon, Doug and I attended the ribbon cutting and the opening for Village on San Juan for the CASA housing for both aged and the kids that are coming out of foster care. And it was interesting. Doug wanted, it was very heartwarming to talk about all the community effort that's gone into that. Makes you just feel good. So we hope that one works as well as we want it to.
Judy and I have each reserved a place.
And if there's nothing else, and one thing I'd like to mention is we had the American Junior Golf Association, the AJGA tournament here in Montrose, and it is a premier golf event for all these young golfers. I had the privilege of playing in one of the tournaments on Monday, the early tournament, and we got a young lady named Ava who was one of the most amazing young women, and just the quality of these kids, the dedication they show to their sport, and the politeness, their attention to detail. It was just really such a great and pleasant event to go to and meet these kids, that these are some of the most amazing young folks. And Ava is a sophomore and outplayed all of us. That tells you the quality and the level of these kids and the skill set they have. But it's also a great event for Montrose, and I just wanted to point out that having all of this top-tier tournament in Montrose generates a lot of money for the city of Montrose, because people come in here, they're staying in our hotels, they're eating in our restaurants, they're shopping here, and it's not only a great cultural benefit, but a great economic benefit for the city of Montrose. So it was really great seeing them being here again, and I'm sure we're going to see them again here next year, and it's a great ongoing event. So good job to all our city staff and to the staff at the Bridges for all their hard work. All right, are there any staff comments? Scott, I never can't pass up.
I will say a real quick one on Fifth. So they are on track to have everything paved in front of the middle school on Fifth before school starts.
Yay.
We might have like 3 or 4 minutes to spare. So we're getting there.
Nice.
Just wrapping up a lot of the water line. work.
Teachers who arrive early.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they have to deal with
students.
us, but,
Yeah.
yeah, with the kids.
And registration, we learned about that last week.
Okay.
been getting a lot of those questions about when it's going to be done, and I keep saying, it's going to be done.
It's wrapping up.
The city
Yep.
engineer guaranteed me it's going to be done, so I'm going to hold them to it.
Yes.
I had a lady the other day say to me, Scott Murphy promised us, as soon as we finish the Niagara roundabout, you'd start the Woodgate one. Well, it's been a month.
No, that's a great clarification. So the intent was actually always to start this fall, give people a break, but that got, the best laid plan. So the Ogden culvert replacement, which is on the Lutz-Heiser Canal, is experiencing piping and at risk of failure. So we actually got the design that's out to bid right now, because we can't close Ogden and Oak Grove at the same time. I mean, we could, but it'd be
That would
bad.
be bad.
We will be doing Ogden first and then go straight into the thing. But always feel free to give them myself. I try and not make, promises I can't keep, but.
Yeah. And you've been excellent at that. So, all right. If there's nothing else, well, then I want to thank everybody, and we will see everyone tomorrow night for our regular city council meeting. Thank you. We are adjourned.